Kael Vance, shipwright by trade, fugitive by circumstance, navigated his sputtering freighter, the Wanderlust, through the treacherous Krell Nebula, its ion trails spitting protests against the erratic gravitic tides. He was unaware that his desperate search for a sanctuary asteroid to make repairs would instead lead him to awaken not only an ancient guardian whose mind held the sorrows of a billion dead suns, but also a cosmic horror slumbering for millennia, all while a shadowy syndicate, the Crimson Hand, watched from the void, eager for the chaos to begin. The nebula's swirling, incandescent gases painted the viewport in hues of violent violet and bruised orange, a chaotic beauty that did little to soothe Kael's frayed nerves. Alarms blared intermittently, a counterpoint to the groaning of stressed metal. He was running on fumes luck, and a desperate hope that the outdated star charts he'd acquired were at least partially accurate. His cargo, advanced atmospheric processor components meant for the fledgling colony on Cygnus Theorid, was technically not illegal, but its manufacturer was under embargo by the domineering Thraxian hegemony, making Kael a de facto smuggler in their eyes. A Thraxian patrol had picked up his signature 2 systems back, and he'd been running ever since. The Wanderlust shuddered violently, a cascade of red lights flashing across Kael's console. "Just a little further, old girl," he muttered, his voice hoarse. His hands, calloused from years of working with metal and machinery, danced over the controls, trying to compensate for a failing starboard inertial dampener. Ahead, a small, unlisted moonlet, shrouded in the nebula's dusty veil, offered the slimmest hope of refuge. It was pockmarked and barren, barely a blip on his long-range scans, but it was solid and, hopefully, deserted. As he wrestled the ship towards it, another jolt, more severe this time, threw him against his restraints. A stray particle stream, or perhaps a poorly aimed warning shot from a pursuer he hadn't detected, had grazed his auxiliary power conduit. Power flickered, and a high-pitched whine emanated from the engine core. "No, no, no, not now!" He fought for control, the moonlet growing rapidly in the viewport. A crash was inevitable. He braced himself, aiming for a relatively flat basin he spotted at the last second. The impact was brutal, a symphony of screaming metal and shattering composites. Darkness claimed him briefly. When Kael regained consciousness, his head throbbed, and the taste of copper filled his mouth. The cockpit was a wreck, emergency lights casting long, eerie shadows. Outside, the alien sky was a maelstrom of cosmic dust and faint, distant starlight filtered through the nebula's glow. He unstrapped himself, wincing as his muscles protested. A quick systems check confirmed his fears. The Wanderlust was crippled. Main power offline, FTL drive shattered, communications gone. He was stranded. With a sigh, he pushed open the buckled hatch and stepped onto the moonlit surface. The air was thin, but breathable, carrying a faint, metallic tang and an almost imperceptible thrum, like a colossal heart beating deep underground. The ground was covered in fine, gray dust that puffed around his boots. It was then he saw it, or rather her, standing near a jagged outcrop of crystalline rock, not 50 meters from his crash site, was a figure unlike any he had ever encountered. She was tall, slender, with skin that seemed to shift in color, subtly reflecting the nebula's light, now a soft lavender, now a muted teal. Her limbs were long, her movements possessed of an unsettling grace. But it was her head that truly captured his attention. It was elongated, and instead of 2 eyes, she possessed multiple pairs, stacked vertically and horizontally, some large and luminous, others smaller, like polished obsidian beads. Kael froze, his hand instinctively moving towards the service pistol holstered at his hip, then paused. She made no aggressive move, merely observed him, her head tilting slightly. One set of her eyes, large and forward-facing, seemed to glow with a faint inner light. Another, lower set, seemed to shimmer, as if seeing in a spectrum beyond his comprehension. He felt a strange sensation, a subtle pressure in his sinuses, and a fleeting, unidentifiable scent, like ozone in something ancient, like dust from a long-sealed tomb. It wasn't unpleasant, just alien. This must be a Coralian, he surmised, recalling fragmented xenobiological briefings. He knew of their existence, a reclusive species from the galactic rim, but details were scarce. Her stillness was absolute, yet he felt an intensity radiating from her, a focused awareness that made the hairs on his arms stand up. This was no random native. There was a purpose to her presence here. His gaze was drawn to what lay behind her, nestled within a hollow carved into the rock face. It was a structure, or perhaps a device, of immense size and utterly alien design. It resembled a sarcophagus, fashioned from a black, non-reflective material that seemed to drink the light. Intricate, shifting patterns, like captured nebulae, read across its surface. It pulsed with that same deep, rhythmic thrum he'd felt in the air, but stronger here, almost a physical vibration in his chest. A sense of profound dread, cold and sharp, washed over him. This was no ordinary relic. This was something else. Something that felt wrong, deeply wrong on a primal level. The Coralian shifted, one slender, multi-jointed hand raising slightly. The air around her seemed to shimmer. Kael felt another wave of that strange pressure, accompanied by a clearer, more defined scent this time, something like burnt cinnamon and static electricity. He had no translator for Coralian pheromonal language, if that's what it was. I mean no harm, he said, his voice raspy. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. My ship crashed. I'm a shipwright, Kael Vance. Her multiple eyes blinked, not in unison, but in a complex, rippling sequence. One pair, the ones that seemed to capture thermal signatures perhaps, focused intently on his chest. Then his head. He felt an odd, tingling sensation, as if his biosigns were being scanned. This close he could see the incredible detail in her physiology. Her skin wasn't smooth but composed of tiny, tessellated scales that caught the light in myriad ways. Her breathing was almost imperceptible. Suddenly, a new alarm blared from the Wanderlust's wreckage, a proximity warning, but not for anything nearby. It was a gravitic distortion warning, focused on the sarcophagus. The patterns on its surface began to writhe more erratically, the deep thrumming intensifying into a painful, bone-jarring vibration. The accidental discharge from his ship's failing systems during the crash, or perhaps the impact itself, must have interfered with whatever contained the sarcophagus or its inhabitant. A section of the sarcophagus glowed an angry red, a hairline fracture appearing, leaking a wispy, shadow-like substance that seemed to absorb light. The Coralian whirled, her movements impossibly fast. A cascade of pheromones hit Kael sharp, acrid, like burning circuits in fear. It was a raw, untranslated wave of pure alarm. She uttered a sound, not speech as he knew it, but a series of rapid, high-frequency clicks and whistles, resonant and deeply unsettling. Her primary eyes fixed on the fracture, and a palpable wave of distress emanated from her. He could almost feel her panic, a stark contrast to her earlier composure. She was the guardian, he realized with dawning horror, and he had just, somehow, compromised the prison of whatever lay within that terrifying coffin. The Chrono-Sarcophagus of the Nameless One. The name echoed in his mind, unbidden, a fragment of forgotten lore, a whisper of cosmic dread. He didn't know how he knew it, but he did. The air grew colder, and the shadows around the sarcophagus seemed to deepen, to writhe with a malevolent intelligence. The Coralian, Lyra'fey, though Kael didn't know her name yet, focused all her attention on the breach. Her hands, delicate yet strong, moved over a series of almost invisible controls on a dais near the sarcophagus. Lights flickered, and Aloham attempted to counter the violent thrumming. Kael, despite the fear coiling in his gut, felt a grudging admiration. She was clearly outmatched, yet she fought. He, on the other hand, had caused this. His shipwright's mind, always analyzing, always seeking solutions, kicked in. Is there anything I can do? He asked, stepping closer, ignoring the prickling sense of danger. My ship's tools are mostly wrecked, but I might have something, some way to seal that breach temporarily. Lyra'fey didn't look at him, but one set of her eyes, perhaps those attuned to electromagnetic frequencies, flickered in his direction. A new scent reached him, less panicked, more analytical, and tinged with something he couldn't quite place: suspicion, perhaps, or a desperate consideration. The Nameless One. The words resonated with an ancient terror. If this entity was as bad as its name suggested, and as its sarcophagus radiated, then they were all in unimaginable trouble. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a low, guttural moan, not of this universe, seemed to emanate from the fractured seal, a sound that promised endless, patient suffering. Kael took another step. My name is Kael. I'm a shipwright. I fix things. Maybe I can help fix this. His inherent patience, his defining trait, settled over him like a familiar cloak. Panic wouldn't help. Analysis and steady hands might. He saw the subtle shift in her posture, the almost imperceptible angle of her head. He wasn't sure if she understood his words, but his tone, his calm demeanor in the face of this growing horror, seemed to register. She needed help, and he, the accidental catalyst of this disaster, was the only one here. The immediate consequence of the breach was a rapidly degrading containment field. Lyra'fey worked with frantic precision, her multi-jointed fingers dancing over controls Kael couldn't even properly see. Strange symbols flared and died on the console. The air crackled with raw energy. He could feel the pressure building, a tangible weight pressing down on him. He realized the subtle frequency shifts. He'd been vaguely aware of were her attempts at communication, or perhaps just the byproduct of her intense concentration, her psionic abilities straining against the escaping malevolence. The energy signature from that thing, it's off the charts. Kael muttered, his own handheld scanner, miraculously intact, buzzing erratically. If that crack widens. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The very fabric of reality around the sarcophagus seemed to be warping. The distant stars seen through the nebula began to twist and distort, their light bending unnaturally. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. This was not just a dangerous entity, it was a cosmic wound. Lyra'fey suddenly gestured towards a recessed panel on the side of the sarcophagus's dais. It slid open, revealing a complex array of crystalline conduits and what looked like organic circuitry. One of the larger crystals was cracked, mirroring the fracture on the sarcophagus itself. He understood. The containment mechanism was failing internally. Can it be repaired? Asked. She emitted a rapid series of clicks, and a new scent, sharper this time, like ozone and something metallic, filled the air. It felt like an affirmative, mixed with urgency. Kael moved forward, his shipwright instincts taking over. I need to see the damage. Do you have any diagnostic tools for this tech? He doubted his own would interface. Lyra'fey's multifaceted eyes focused on him, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Then, with a graceful movement, she plucked a thin, glowing stylus from her belt and handed it to him. It hummed faintly in his grasp, adapting its shape slightly to fit his hand. The moment he touched it, images, schematics, and alien script flooded his vision, not through his eyes but directly into his mind. It was overwhelming, disorienting, like drinking from a fire hose of pure data. He staggered, clutching his head. This was her way of communicating complex ideas. Not pheromones for this, but direct data transfer. He saw the intricate workings of the containment field, the flow of energies, the critical failure points. He also saw, with chilling clarity, the projected consequences of a full breach. It wasn't just destruction, it was corruption, a twisting of life and reality into something nightmarish. And he saw her, Lyra'fey, a solitary figure, bound by an ancient oath, standing against this horror for untold centuries. The weight of her burden, the sheer loneliness of it, hit him with unexpected force. I understand. He managed, shaking his head to clear the residual data echoes. He looked at the cracked crystal. This focusing crystal, it's shattered. We need to replace it or create a bypass. Do you have a spare? A soft, mournful chime? A frequency shift that vibrated in his teeth, accompanied by a scent of dust and old sorrows. No spares. This was it. This was the last line of defense. He looked at the wreckage of the Wanderlust. My ship has power conduits, energy regulators, some might be adaptable. It's a long shot. His voice was calm, patient, but inside, his mind raced. This was a monumental task, with tools not designed for this, against a threat beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a piercing shriek tore through the air from above. Both Kael and Lyra'fey looked up. 3 sleek, black ships, bearing the jagged crimson claw insignia of the Crimson Hand Syndicate, descended through the nebulous haze, their weapons already powering up. They hadn't been pursuing him. They had been tracking the energy signature of the sarcophagus, waiting for a moment of weakness. Or perhaps, they had even caused the stray shot that had crippled his ship, hoping to trigger something like this. His accidental breach had just become their golden opportunity. The immediate consequences had just escalated exponentially. They were no longer just dealing with a failing seal. They were under attack by a ruthless criminal syndicate that clearly knew what this place was and what was at stake. The first plasma bolts slammed into the ground near the sarcophagus, sending shards of rock and superheated dust flying. The fight for survival, and perhaps the fate of this sector, had just begun. They know. Kael yelled over the din of weapons fire. They know about this thing. He grabbed the stylus Lyra'fey had given him. We need to stabilize that crystal now. Can you shield this area while I work? Lyra'fey didn't reply in words Kael could understand, but a shimmering energy field, tinged with amber, erupted around the dais and the sarcophagus, deflecting a volley of incoming fire. It flickered under the assault, but held. Her stance was resolute, multiple sets of eyes tracking the enemy ships, while others seemed to focus inwards, drawing on reserves of energy Kael couldn't fathom. He saw the strain on her, the way her slender frame trembled slightly with the effort. The air around her was thick with a complex cocktail of pheromones, determination, pain, and an unyielding defiance. He turned to the damaged crystal, the alien schematic still swirling in his mind's eye. His patience was about to be tested as never before, with cosmic horrors on one side and ruthless pirates on the other. The Crimson Hand ships circled, their commanders clearly surprised by the strength of the localized shield. Focus fire on the generator. The alien can't maintain it for long. A harsh, synthesized voice boomed from one of the ships, audible even through the thin atmosphere. Kael ignored them, his attention entirely on the task. The crystal was a complex lattice, its internal structure fractured in multiple places. He couldn't replace it, but he might be able to bridge the damaged pathways using salvage components from the Wanderlust. It was a desperate, almost insane plan. "I need access to my ship's cargo hold," Kael said, his voice tight with concentration. "There are some high-grade energy conduits and microfilaments in there. If I can reroute the power flow around the main fracture." Lyra'fey made a series of sharp, clicking sounds. The shield around them rippled, and for a terrifying moment, Kael thought it would fail. But then, a narrow corridor of energy extended from their sanctuary towards the Wanderlust's wreck, a shimmering tunnel just wide enough for one person. It was an invitation, a risk she was taking. He nodded, a surge of gratitude mixing with the adrenaline. "Cover me. I'll be as quick as I can." He sprinted down the energy corridor, debris raining around him from near misses. The Crimson Hand ships, seeing his movement, concentrated their fire, trying to collapse the tunnel. Reaching the Wanderlust, he scrambled into the breached cargo hold. It was a mess of shattered crates and scattered components. His patient nature, usually a calm sea, was now a laser focus in a storm. He located the reinforced case containing the specialized conduits he needed, his hands working with practiced speed, despite the tremors running through the deck. Grabbing what he could, along with a portable micro-welder and a diagnostic kit, he turned to race back. The return trip was even more harrowing. The energy tunnel flickered violently, and Lyra'fey emitted a high-pitched keening sound, a clear indication of the strain she was under. One of the Crimson Hand ships, a nimble interceptor, broke formation and dived, its lasers searing the ground where the tunnel had been moments before Kael passed. He threw himself back into the shielded area around the sarcophagus, skidding to a halt beside the dais, components clutched to his chest. "Got them," he gasped, laying out the conduits. Now for the tricky part. He looked at Lyra'fey. Her skin was paler, the vibrant hues dulled, and one of her smaller, jewel-like eyes was closed, as if damaged or overloaded. The pheromonal scent around her was fainter, tinged with exhaustion. But her primary eyes still blazed with defiance. He felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness towards this alien being he had only just met, this solitary guardian fighting an impossible battle. As Kael began the delicate work of trying to integrate human-made conduits into the alien crystal array, splicing wires thinner than hairs, the battle outside raged. Lyra'fey's shield was weakening, shrinking. The Crimson Hand was relentless. Suddenly, a new voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the comm channels, overriding the syndicate's chatter. "Crimson Hand vessels, this is Commander Valerius of the Galactic Concord Stellar Patrol. You are in violation of Restricted Zone Omega-9 and engaging in unprovoked assault. Cease fire and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction." 3 Concord cruisers, sleek and silver, dropped out of hyperspace, their much larger forms dwarfing the syndicate ships. Their weapon emplacements glowed with imminent fire. The Crimson Hand ships, caught completely by surprise, hesitated. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, broken only by the crackle of energy from Lyra'fey's failing shield and the ominous thrum of the sarcophagus. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in Kael's chest. The lead Crimson Hand vessel, a heavily armed frigate, didn't hesitate for long. Instead of surrendering, it opened fire on the nearest Concord cruiser. The space around the moonlet erupted into a full-scale battle. Lasers and plasma bolts crisscrossed the void, explosions blossoming like deadly flowers. Kael flinched as a stray shot impacted the ground nearby, shaking the dais. Lyra'fey stumbled, her shield collapsing completely. The raw, untamed energy of the sarcophagus washed over them, cold and terrifying. The fracture on its surface pulsed wider now, leaking more of that shadowy essence. Hold still, Kael urged, his hand steady despite the chaos. He made the final connection, the micro-welder flaring briefly. The patched-up crystal array sputtered, then glowed with a renewed, albeit uneven, light. The violent vibrations from the sarcophagus lessened slightly, the ominous moan receding a fraction. It wasn't a full repair, not by a long shot, but it was something, a temporary reprieve. Just then, a section of the cliff face above them exploded inwards. Standing silhouetted against the dust and firelight was a figure in heavy combat armor. The crimson claw of the syndicate emblazoned on its chest. The guardian and the interloper. The figure's voice, electronically distorted, grated. "You've caused us enough trouble." The soldier raised a heavy plasma rifle. Before Kael could react, Lyra'fey moved. She launched herself at the armored figure with astonishing speed and ferocity, not with weapons, but with her own body. Her slender limbs became blurs, striking at joints and weak points in the armor with impossible precision. It was a desperate, almost suicidal attack. Kael scrambled for his service pistol, but the fight was too close, too fast. He saw one of Lyra'fey's arms get caught, heard a sickening crack, and saw her cry out, a silent scream of pheromonal pain that tore at his senses. This was the turning point. The arrival of the Concord. The direct assault by the syndicate operative. Lyra'fey's injury, their situation had irrevocably shifted. Commander Valerius's voice crackled over Kyle's discarded scanner, which had picked up the Concord frequency. Unidentified human and Coralian life form near the primary energy source. We have hostile ground contact. Evac recommended. We are attempting to secure the artifact. What is your status? Kael looked at Lyra'fey, who was now wrestling with the syndicate soldier, clearly outmatched in terms of raw strength despite her agility. He fired his pistol, the shot sparking off the soldier's armor, making him stagger back. We're occupied. Kael yelled into the scanner. The Coralian is injured. The sarcophagus is still unstable. It was Valerius himself who rappelled down from a low hovering shuttle a few minutes later, after his troops had neutralized the remaining syndicate ground team and driven off their ships. The space battle still raged overhead, but the immediate ground threat was over. Valerius was a stern, weathered man, his face a roadmap of old battles and hard decisions. He surveyed the scene, the damaged sarcophagus, Kael's makeshift repairs, the injured Lyra'fey cradling her clearly broken arm, her multiple eyes fixed on Valerius with wary intensity. Report, Valerius said. His voice clipped. Kael quickly explained what happened: his crash, the accidental breach, the syndicate's arrival. He emphasized Lyra'fey's role as guardian and the nature of the Nameless One. Valerius listened, his expression unreadable. He then turned his attention to Lyra'fey. Coralian, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Your species has been silent for a long time. We thought your order of guardians was extinct. Lyra'fey responded with a soft hiss and a wave of pheromones that Kael now recognized as conveying dignity and sorrow. He tried to interpret. She says she is the last. The others fell, protecting other sites, or faded with time. Valerius nodded slowly. The Crimson Hand knew about this. They have informants everywhere. They were likely trying to weaponize this Nameless One, or perhaps just unleash it to sow chaos and profit from the ensuing wars. He looked at the sarcophagus, then at Kael's patched job. Your repair is ingenious, for its crudeness. But it won't hold. The entity within is already stirring. Its influence is beginning to warp local space-time. That's what drew our long-range patrols to this sector, initially the anomaly you mentioned. He then looked from Kael to Lyra'fey, a calculating glint in his eyes. You, shipwright, stumbled into something far beyond your pay grade, and you, guardian, are failing. Alone, neither of you can succeed in resecuring this abomination. He paused. The Concord has limited resources to deal with Precursor-level threats of this magnitude directly, especially with the Thraxian hegemony breathing down our necks. However, legends speak of a Precursor artifact, the Keystone of Aethel. It's said to be capable of stabilizing or sealing dimensional rifts and nullifying such entities. Kael's heart sank. A legendary artifact. That meant a quest, likely dangerous and with little chance of success. Lyra'fey emitted a complex series of clicks and a new scent, inquisitive and tinged with something like ancient hope. Kael felt a faint echo in his mind, a flicker of recognition from the data burst she'd given him. The Keystone of Aethel. Her people knew of it. The Keystone's last known location, Valerius continued, was in the possession of a reclusive species called the Sylvans, who inhabit the Viridian Nebula. They communicate non-verbally through bioluminescence and intricate dances. Getting anything from them is difficult. He looked pointedly at Kael, then Lyra'fey. You, shipwright Vance, have proven resourceful. And you, Guardian Lyra'fey, possess knowledge we lack, and perhaps a way to communicate where others have failed. You both have a vested interest in seeing the Nameless One contained. He then delivered the core of his plan, the turning point that would bind their fates. I am therefore assigning you a joint mission. You will travel to the Viridian Nebula, locate the Sylvans, and secure the Keystone of Aethel. The Concord will provide you with a ship fast, discreet and basic supplies. My science teams will attempt to reinforce your repairs here and monitor the sarcophagus, but they can only buy you time. Weeks, perhaps a month at most, before a full breach becomes inevitable. Kael stared. Together. Commander, with all due respect, she can barely communicate with me, and we just met under extreme circumstances. Lyra'fey, despite her injuries, straightened, her primary eyes flashing. A scent of affronted pride, sharp and clear, reached Kael. Valerius's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. Precisely. Your animosity, or at least your current friction, might make you more effective. You'll be too busy watching each other to make foolish mistakes. Or, he added, his voice dropping slightly, you'll fail spectacularly. Either way, it's a risk I'm willing to take, given the alternatives. He was clearly one of those superiors who believed pressure and unusual pairings could forge diamonds or grind things to dust. Your ship, the Star Chaser, is being prepped on my flagship. A medical team will tend to your injuries, Guardian. You leave within the hour. Forced proximity. A joint mission with Galactic stakes. Kael looked at Lyra'fey. Her multifaceted gaze met his. He saw pain, exhaustion, the crushing weight of her duty, but also a flicker of that same desperate hope he'd felt. And in the subtle shift of her pheromonal signature, a reluctant acknowledgement that this, however improbable, was their only path forward. The wanderlust was gone. His old life was gone. Now, there was only this mission, this alien, and the growing dread of what they had left behind, temporarily restrained but far from defeated. The journey aboard the Star Chaser began in silence. A taut, humming quiet filled more with unspoken anxieties than peace. The ship was small, built for speed and stealth, with compact crew quarters that forced Kael and Lyra'fey into unavoidable proximity. Lyra'fey's arm had been expertly mended by the Concord medics, encased in a sophisticated biocast that aided rapid healing, but she still moved with a certain stiffness, a constant reminder of their violent introduction. She had claimed the small astrogation nook as her own, her multiple eyes scanning star charts, or sometimes just staring out into the void, her expression, if he could even call it that, unreadable. Kael, true to his nature, was patient. He didn't push for conversation, didn't pry. He focused on familiarizing himself with the Star Chaser's systems, running diagnostics, optimizing power flow, the work of a shipwright, a comforting routine in an utterly unroutine situation. He'd make nutrient paste for them both, leaving her portion near her nook, and she would eventually take it. Small gestures. He learned to read the subtle shifts in the air around her, the almost imperceptible changes in her skin tone, the faint, evocative pheromones she unconsciously emitted, a musky, earthy scent when she was deep in thought, like damp soil after rain, a faint, sharp ozone when she was agitated or focused, a soft, almost floral note when she seemed less burdened, usually when looking at particularly beautiful nebulae through the viewport. Their first real shared challenge came 3 days into the journey. They were navigating an asteroid field in an uncharted system, a shortcut Valerius's intel had suggested, when their sensors picked up a distress beacon. It was faint, old, likely a trap. Kael's instinct was to ignore it, their mission was too critical. But Lyra'fey reacted. Her head snapped up, her thermal spectrum eyes flaring. She emitted a series of urgent clicks, and a pheromone Kael now associated with concern, almost empathy, a scent like warm honey and something metallic. She pointed a slender finger at the console displaying the beacon's origin. It's probably pirates, Kael said, keeping his voice even. Or slavers. We can't afford to. He stopped. Lyra'fey was looking at him, her largest eyes, the ones that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom, fixed on his. The scent of her concern intensified, and he felt a faint mental nudge, not data, but an emotion, a plea. He sighed. All right, we'll make a cautious approach, But if it looks even remotely suspicious, we're out. His patience extended to her, it seemed, even when it went against his better judgment. The beacon led them to a derelict mining barge, half swallowed by a massive, slow-drifting asteroid. No life signs. But as they drew closer, Lyra'fey became agitated. Her skin flushed a deep indigo, and her pheromones shifted to alarm burnt sugar and static. "What is it?" Kael asked, his hand hovering over the weapon's console. She projected an image into his mind, a small, hidden compartment deep within the barge. And inside, people. Alive but shielded from standard life sign scans. Slaves, he realized with a cold dread. The Crimson Hand or a similar outfit. This wasn't a distress beacon, it was a hidden prison. "Damn it," Kael muttered. This was exactly what he'd wanted to avoid. But looking at Lyra'fey, at the fierce protectiveness now radiating from her, he knew they couldn't just leave. Her past, her role as a guardian, it wasn't just about ancient artifacts. It was about protecting life. He was beginning to see the depth of her. She wasn't just an alien, she was a being of profound, if strangely expressed, compassion. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "New plan. We're going in." They docked stealthily, Lyra'fey's unique sensory capabilities proving invaluable. Her thermal eyes detected heat signatures through bulkheads, her EM-sensitive eyes traced power conduits and security systems. She moved like a wraith through the darkened corridors of the barge, Kael following, his pistol ready. He was struck by her efficiency, her silent deadliness when needed. She disabled automated sentries with precise energy pulses from a device on her wrist, a tool he hadn't seen before. Her fluid Coralian leadership was subtly asserting itself. She was better suited for this infiltration, and Kael, recognizing it, fell into a supportive role without question. They found the hidden compartment. Inside, a dozen beings from various species were huddled together, malnourished and terrified. As Kael worked on the magnetic locks, Lyra'fey stood guard, a silent, multi-eyed sentinel. He felt a new scent from her then, something soft and reassuring, aimed at the prisoners, not him. It was like the smell of fresh bread in calm waters. Some of the prisoners, initially terrified of her alien appearance, visibly relaxed. The rescue was tense but successful. They overpowered the two brutish guards, non-lethally, using stun charges. As they escorted the freed slaves back to the Star Chaser, Kael saw Lyra'fey pause by a small, wilting plant in a cracked pot, left behind in the squalor. She gently touched one of its leaves, and for a moment, a soft, pearlescent glow enveloped her hand. The plant seemed to straighten, its color deepening. It was a small, almost insignificant gesture, but it spoke volumes to Kael about her connection to life, in all its forms. Back on the Star Chaser, after delivering the rescued individuals to a nearby neutral station, a detour that cost them nearly a day, the atmosphere between Kael and Lyra'fey had shifted. The silence was less taut, more comfortable. He found himself watching her more, intrigued by the way her different eyes constantly scanned her surroundings, each set focusing on different aspects of reality. He wondered what the universe looked like through her senses. One evening, as he was charting their course through a particularly dense nebular cluster, Lyra'fey approached him. She held out a small, intricately carved data crystal. He took it, and as his fingers brushed hers, he felt a faint warmth, a subtle energy transfer. "What's this?" he asked. She made a soft, chuffing sound, and a scent like old parchment and starlight filled the small cockpit. Then images and sensations flooded his mind, but gentler this time, more controlled. He saw her species, the Coralians in their prime, cities of living crystal, glowing with internal light, built in harmony with nature. He saw them communing with their ancestors, their forms shimmering as they entered altered states of consciousness, surrounded by the loving spirits of those who came before. He saw their fluid leadership, individuals stepping forward to guide, based on their suitability for a challenge, their authority resonating through a communal psionic network. And he saw the archives, vast libraries of knowledge stored not in books or computers, but within the minds of chosen individuals, living libraries, like Lyra'fey. He felt the weight of millennia of history, culture, joy, and sorrow that she carried within her. He saw the coming of the blight that had decimated her people, the slow decay of their civilization, the desperate, fading fight to preserve what little remained, to guard the dangerous legacies like the Nameless One. The experience left him breathless, humbled. He looked at Lyra'fey with new eyes. She wasn't just a guardian, she was a vessel of an entire civilization, the last ember of a dying star. Why show me this? A complex pheromonal wave washed over him: trust, vulnerability, and a question. He thought he understood. She was showing him who she was. Why this mission? Why everything mattered so much to her? She was the keeper of her species' entire historical and cultural archive. And somewhere within that vast library of knowledge she held, he suspected, was the key to understanding not just the Keystone of Aethel, but perhaps even the mysterious galactic anomaly that Commander Valerius had mentioned, the one warping space-time. The anomaly that seemed to be growing in tandem with the Nameless One stirring. Your people, they were beautiful, Kael said softly, his voice filled with an empathy that surprised him. And you carry all of that. Lyra'fey's primary eyes, the ones that seemed to reflect her soul, softened. She reached out a slender finger and gently touched the back of his hand, a fleeting contact that sent a shiver through him. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was a connection, a bridge formed across an immense cultural and biological chasm. He realized his patience hadn't just been a passive trait. It had allowed him to see beyond her alienness, to wait for her to reveal herself at her own pace. And what she revealed was extraordinary. The romantic tension, unexpected and delicate, began to weave itself into the fabric of their shared journey, as subtle and complex as her pheromonal language. He found himself wanting to understand more, not just about her mission, but about her. The shipwright who fixed broken things now found himself wanting to somehow help mend the broken heart of a dying civilization, embodied in this remarkable, resilient woman. Their arrival in the Viridian Nebula was like flying into a dream. Unlike the chaotic Krell Nebula, the Viridian was a vast expanse of soft, ethereal greens and blues, shimmering with cosmic dust that glowed like captured fireflies. Planets here were wreathed in bioluminescent flora, their oceans shining with an inner light. It was the home of the Sylvans, the non-verbal species Valerius had mentioned. Finding them, however, proved to be a challenge. They left no technological signatures, no settlements visible from orbit. They're said to live in symbiosis with the megaflora of their worlds. Kael mused, scanning the lush surface of a planet designated Sylvanus Prime. How do we even make contact without scaring them off? Lyra'fey, who had been studying the planet with all her optical arrays, suddenly stiffened. A complex sequence of pheromones filled the cockpit: excitement, recognition, and a peculiar, resonant hum that Kael felt in his bones. She pointed towards a vast, continent-sized forest that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light, like a giant, breathing lung. Within the data she had shared, there were fragmented Coralian records of ancient contact with a species that communicated through song of light and form, the Sylvans. You think you can talk to them? Kael asked, intrigued. She gave a slight nod, a scent of cautious optimism like spring rain accompanying the gesture. They took the Star Chaser down through the shimmering atmosphere, landing in a colossal clearing surrounded by trees that towered miles high, their canopies interwoven to create a living cathedral, light filtering down in shifting patterns of emerald and sapphire. The air was alive with the scent of unknown blossoms and rich earth, and a chorus of sounds not animal but botanical. Rustlings, chimes, soft sighs, as if the forest itself was breathing and singing. As they disembarked, figures began to emerge from the bioluminescent undergrowth. The Sylvans were tall, graceful beings, their forms seemingly composed of woven light and plant matter. They had no discernible faces, no mouths, but their bodies glowed and shifted in color and intensity, intricate patterns rippling across their skin in complex, silent symphonies. They moved with a flowing, dance-like grace. Most species would be utterly baffled, unable to find a starting point for communication. But Lyra'fey was not most species. She stepped forward, her own skin beginning to shimmer, her multiple eyes reflecting the Sylvan's light. She began to emit subtle frequency shifts, not her usual clicks, but something more melodic, harmonic. And then, she began to move, her body echoing the Sylvan's flowing gestures, but adding her own unique Coralian grace. It wasn't a dance Kael recognized, but it was intricate, expressive, and deeply beautiful. The Sylvans paused, their light patterns steadying, focusing on her. Kael watched, mesmerized. This was her element, her deep understanding of non-standard communication coming to the fore. He saw her patience mirrored in the Sylvan stillness, their willingness to observe, to understand. Hours passed. Lyra'fey's dance and light play became more complex, interwoven with subtle pheromonal cues that the Sylvans, with their deep connection to the natural world, seemed to perceive and respond to. Their own light patterns began to shift, to harmonize with hers, creating a silent, luminous dialogue. Kael stayed back, observing, providing a silent, supportive presence. He realized the depth of her abilities went far beyond being a living library. Her capacity for empathy, for connection, was astounding. He felt a growing admiration that was rapidly deepening into something more profound. He saw her not just as an alien, but as Lyra'fey, a specific, unique individual who carried immense burdens, but also possessed incredible strength and grace. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the Sylvans, taller and more luminous than the others, glided forward. It extended a limb made of woven light and flowering vines towards Lyra'fey. She reached out her own hand, and where they touched, a brilliant, warm light flared, then subsided. An understanding had been reached. Lyra'fey turned to Kael, her primary eyes luminous, her pheromonal signature one of quiet triumph and something else. A warmth directed at him, a shared sense of accomplishment. They understand. She projected not with a data burst, but with a gentle mental touch, a feeling of shared comprehension. They know of the Nameless One, they call it the Shadow Blight, and they have the Keystone. They will give it to us. The Sylvans led them deep into the heart of their living forest, to a sanctuary woven from light and ancient trees. There, resting on a pedestal of flowering crystal, was the Keystone of Aethel. It wasn't what Kael expected. It wasn't a gem or a technological device, but a living, seed-like object, pulsing with a soft, golden light, radiating an immense sense of peace and stability. As Lyra'fey reached for it, the Sylvan Elder communicated again, a cascade of light patterns and gentle emanations. Lyra'fey translated for Kael, her voice a soft murmur in his mind. They say the Keystone needs a harmonious conduit. 2 minds, 2 hearts working in concert. One to anchor it, one to direct its energies. Alone it can be overwhelming. She looked at him, her multifaceted gaze searching his. They believe we can do this. Together. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about carrying an artifact. It was about a bond, a synergy. The stakes surrounding the Keystone, and their relationship, had just become inextricably intertwined. The Crimson Hand Syndicate was still out there. Valerius had warned them that their spy network was extensive. They wouldn't let such a prize as the Keystone, or the chaos of the Nameless One, slip through their fingers. The relative peace of the Sylvan forest felt like the calm before a gathering storm. As they prepared to leave Sylvanus Prime, the Keystone safely stored in a specialized containment unit aboard the Star Chaser, the Sylvan Elder approached Lyra'fey one last time. It offered her a small, luminous flower, which pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. Lyra'fey accepted it reverently. A parting gift, she conveyed to Kael, a symbol of connection, and a warning. They sense a growing darkness in the galaxy, a discord that feeds things like the Nameless One. The Crimson Hand is but one symptom of this larger malaise. The weight of their mission settled heavily on Kael. It wasn't just about stopping one cosmic horror anymore. It was about fighting a creeping tide of darkness. But looking at Lyra'fey, who now stood a little taller, a quiet strength radiating from her, he felt a surge of determination. They had faced impossible odds already and found a way. Their journey back towards the Krell Nebula and the waiting sarcophagus was fraught with a new kind of tension. The presence of the Keystone aboard the ship was palpable, a soft thrum of power that resonated deep within Kael's bones. It also seemed to amplify the growing connection between him and Lyra'fey. The forced proximity, the shared dangers, the moments of vulnerability all had stripped away their initial defenses. One cycle, as they navigated a treacherous asteroid belt, an early warning system that Kael had jury-rigged from leftover Wanderlust parts and Concord tech, suddenly blared. "Ambush!" Kael yelled, throwing the Star Chaser into a violent evasive maneuver. 3 Crimson Hand destroyers materialized from sensor blind spots, their weapons already hot. They had been waiting. "They must have tracked us from Sylvanus Prime," Lyra'fey exclaimed, her voice a mixture of her natural clicks and whistles, and a surprisingly clear, if accented, burst of spoken Galactic standard, a testament to her rapid adaptation, and Kael suspected her desire to communicate more directly with him. Her multiple eyes darted across the sensor displays, processing information at a speed that made Kyle's head spin. "Their firing solutions are predictive. They've analyzed our previous escape patterns. Then we give them a new pattern." Kael gritted his teeth, pushing the Star Chaser's engines to their absolute limit. Plasma bolts seared past their viewport. The ship shuddered under near misses. This was where his skills as a pilot and shipwright truly shone. He knew every nuance of the Star Chaser, every limit he could push. But the Syndicate ships were newer, better armed. The Keystone, Lyra'fey said suddenly, her gaze fixed on its containment unit. The Sylvan said it needs 2 minds. Perhaps it can help us now. Kael hesitated. Using an unknown Precursor artifact in the middle of a firefight. It was insane. But they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. How? He asked, dodging another volley that clipped their shields, sending sparks flying from a console. Focus, Lyra'fey urged, her hand reaching for his across the cockpit. Connect with me. With the Keystone. Feel its rhythm. He took her hand. Her skin was cool, the touch sending an unexpected jolt through him, not unpleasant. He closed his eyes for a split second, trying to filter out the chaos of the battle, and focused on her presence, on the gentle thrum of the Keystone. He felt her mind touch his, not an invasive data dump, but a gentle merging, a shared consciousness. And through her, he felt the Keystone an immense, benevolent power, waiting to be guided. He felt Lyra'fey directing a stream of something. Not energy as he knew it, but a wave of focused intent, amplified by the Keystone, channeled through their linked minds. It wasn't a weapon. It was a distortion. A subtle warping of space-time around the Star Chaser. The incoming plasma bolt suddenly veered off course, as if hitting an invisible, slippery surface. The Syndicate ship's targeting locks went haywire. What in the void? One of the Syndicate captains cursed over an open comm channel. It's working. Kael exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. He could feel the strain on Lyra'fey, the immense concentration it took. Her phenomenal signature was sharp with effort, like charged ions. But how long can you maintain it? Not long, she gasped, her voice strained. But long enough, perhaps, to use their confusion. Kael nodded. He saw an opening, a risky maneuver through a dense cluster of asteroids. Hold on. He threw the Star Chaser into a wild spin, using the localized space-time distortion to make impossible turns, threading the needle through gaps that should have torn them apart. The Syndicate ships, their targeting still scrambled, struggled to follow, 2 of them colliding with asteroids in their clumsy pursuit. The third, more cautious, backed off, clearly unwilling to risk further losses against such unpredictable tactics. They burst out of the asteroid field, relatively unscathed, leaving the bewildered and damaged Crimson Hand ships behind. Kael let out a whoop of triumph, then immediately sobered, looking at Lyra'fey. She was slumped in her seat, pale, her breathing shallow. The pheromonal scent of exhaustion was heavy in the air. He unstrapped himself and rushed to her side. Lyra, are you all right? He gently touched her shoulder. She opened her eyes, her primary set focusing on him with effort. A faint sweet scent like crushed blossoms emanated from her. Tired, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. The Keystone, it takes much, but we did it, Kael. She used his name clearly, easily, and her eyes, all of them, held a warmth, a deep, undeniable affection that made his heart ache. He helped her to the small medical bay, his arm around her waist for support. The physical contact was no longer awkward or accidental. It felt right, natural. As he tended to her, applying a nutrient stimulant, he found himself confessing, Lyra, when we were connected with the Keystone, I felt, I'm not sure how to describe it. She looked at him, her multifaceted gaze searching his. I felt it too, Kael. A resonance, a harmony. A soft blush of color, a pale rose, appeared on her cheeks. My people believe that such a connection, especially when amplified by an artifact like the Keystone, is rare. Sacred, even. He met her gaze, his own feelings, so long held in check by his patient nature, now undeniable. Lyra, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I care about you. More than I thought possible. Her primary eyes widened slightly, then softened. A delicate, incredibly sweet pheromone, like starlight and honey, enveloped him. And I, Kael Vance, shipwright of the stars, she said, her voice gaining a little strength, a hint of her old melodic cadence returning. I find myself, unexpectedly, caring for you. She reached up, her slender fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was electric. Across all the voids, against all reason, an unexpected union. He leaned down, and she met him halfway. Their kiss was tentative at first, then deepened. A silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary bond forged in shared danger, mutual respect, and burgeoning love. It was a kiss that transcended species, a merging of 2 souls who had found solace and strength in each other amidst a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos. The pheromones she released were intoxicating, a complex symphony of joy, relief, and a deep, resonant love that Kael felt not just with his senses, but in his very core. It was a language more profound than any words. Her multiple eyes, each reflecting a different spectrum of his face, closed in sequence, a sign of complete trust and surrender. In that moment, the threat of the Nameless One, the Crimson Hand, the fate of the galaxy had all receded, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a perfect, luminous present. Their love, born amidst cosmic conflict, was now their greatest strength, a force perhaps even more powerful than the Keystone itself. Their respite was short-lived. As they neared the Krell Nebula, a priority message from Commander Valerius cut through their quiet intimacy. His face, grim and shadowed, appeared on their main view screen. Vance, Lyra'fey, we have a critical situation. The Crimson Hand, they're not just waiting for the Nameless One to breach. They're accelerating it. How? Kael asked, his hand instinctively finding Lyra'fey's. Our long-range scans picked up a massive energy surge emanating from a derelict orbital station near the moonlet, where the sarcophagus is located. It's an old Thraxian hegemony shadow altar, a place designed for unsavory rituals amplifying dark energies. The syndicate has repurposed it. They're not just trying to release the Nameless One, they're trying to control it, or at least direct its initial destructive wave towards the core worlds, specifically targeting planets crucial to both the Concord and the Thraxian hegemony. They intend to provoke a full-scale galactic war, and in the ensuing chaos seize power. Lyra'fey's skin paled to a ghostly white. A pheromone of pure dread, cold and sharp as ice, filled the cockpit. The shadow altar, my ancestors spoke of such places. They corrupt, they amplify malice. If they use it in conjunction with the Nameless One, she didn't need to finish. The thought of that infinitely patient, pure malice being weaponized was beyond horrifying. My teams on the moonlet are pinned down. Valerius continued, his voice tight. The syndicate has deployed a small fleet to secure the area around the altar. They have also, somehow, found a way to agitate the Nameless One. The containment field your patch-up provided, Kael, is failing rapidly. We estimate hours, not days before a full breach. You are our only hope. The Star Chaser is the only ship that can slip through their blockade. You need to get to that altar, use the Keystone of Aethel to counteract their ritual, and reseal the sarcophagus before it's too late. The rising action was upon them, pushing them towards a confrontation they both dreaded and knew was inevitable. Kael looked at Lyra'fey. Her fear was palpable, but beneath it, her resolve was hardening, her multiple eyes blazing with a fierce, protective light. This was it. The culmination of her ageless vigil, of their desperate quest. We understand, Commander, Kael said, his voice steady. We're on our way. As they plotted their final approach, Lyra'fey shared more of her knowledge. The shadow altar works by creating a resonant frequency with entities of darkness, drawing on their power and allowing a measure of control, or at least influence. The ritual likely involves sacrifice, not necessarily of life, but of hope, of order. They will be trying to channel the Nameless One's essence into a focused wave of despair and destruction. And the Keystone? Kael asked, meticulously checking their ship systems, preparing for what was likely to be their final battle. How do we use it against that? The Keystone resonates with harmony, with creation. Lyra'fey explained, her fingers tracing patterns on the cool surface of its container. It can disrupt their dark resonance, create a counter-frequency, but it will require everything we have. We must be perfectly synchronized, our intent pure. The Sylvans warned that misuse, or a lack of harmony, could shatter it, or even amplify the chaos. She looked at him, her love and trust a tangible presence between them. I believe in us, Kael. I believe in us too, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He squeezed her hand. Let's go save the galaxy. A wry smile touched his lips. It was a ridiculously grand statement, but right now, it felt like the simple truth. The Star Chaser slipped through the outer screen of Crimson Hand pickets. Kael's piloting skills pushed to their absolute limit, augmented by Lyra'fey's extraordinary sensory input. She guided him through gravitic eddies and sensor blind spots with uncanny precision, her multiple eyes seeing pathways he couldn't. The Thraxian shadow altar loomed ahead, a monstrous, skeletal structure clinging to the void like a parasite, crackling with an unholy, crimson light. It was built around a nexus of distorted space-time, a wound in reality that the syndicate was actively prying open. At its heart, Kael could sense the terrifying, amplified thrum of the Nameless One, now a raging, hateful scream that vibrated through the very hull of their ship. The altar was heavily defended. Turrets bristled from its surface, and patrol ships swarmed around it like angry hornets. A direct assault was suicide. There, Lyra'fey whispered, pointing with one of her thermal-sensitive eyes towards a maintenance conduit, barely visible against the dark metal of the station. A thermal vent. Weakly shielded. We can get in there, but the ship won't fit. Spacewalk it is then, Kael said, already reaching for their environment suits. You ready for this? Lyra'fey met his gaze, her own reflecting a mixture of fear and fierce determination. A pheromonal scent of courage, sharp and metallic like a drawn blade, emanated from her. With you, Kael. Always, the climax sequence began. They exited the Star Chaser, tethered to each other, the keystone secured in a specialized harness on Kael's back. The silence of the void was broken only by their breathing and the distant, malevolent thrum of the